In the following tutorial, we're going to take a look at using numbers with the if statement. Now, we've learned how to use if and switch statements a number of different ways in previous tutorials. This one is going to be a little bit different because we're also going to be learning a little bit about operators. Operators are the different comparison operators that we're using. That means less than, equal to. This means not equal to. We can also do less than or equal to. And then right here, these are really fun. These are kind of like additional operators. It says if num1 is less than num2 and if num3 is less than num4, then that's true. And so what we're going to do is find out if these conditions are true and then output either true or false up to this particular item. So let's go ahead and start our code. And I'm going to go ahead, just to make it easier for us to work with, I'm going to go ahead and copy the check password 1 code, and we'll put that down at the very bottom, because that has some if statements in it already. And this is going to be our numbers. Check numbers is going to be this particular section. Now, before we go ahead and change our functions and everything else, well, we might as well. I'll just go ahead and take out some of the things that we really don't need. We'll say check num1. Check nums1. And we're going to take out everything back to the else. So it's a really simple one. Now we can also take out what our condition is right now, and we can probably take out this other stuff for right now so that we just have a little bit of information. Let's find out what button we're going to be clicking on. That's going to be check nums1 button. So I'm going to copy that so I can paste that in here. So we just need that to be matching. So here is the beginning of our different ones. Function check nums1 has a mouse event, and if some condition exists, then do this. And we need check nums underscore btn dot add event listener mouse event dot click check nums1. So that's the function. So this is a very simple beginning for our check numbers. Now, what we're going to need to do before we go too far is actually create our different variables. So we're going to do var num1, and we'll equal that to 1. Now we're going to do var num 4 times, so we'll do num2 equals 2, num3 equals 3, and num4 equals 4. Now what we should really have is some sort of unassigned integer. There it is, uint. So if we have our strict data typing, that's definitely best practice. So we'll call these unassigned integers. So we have var num1, num2, num3, and num4, and we have the values set for that. So if we take a look at the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to find out if num1 is less than num2, then go ahead and output true. So let's say if num1 is less than num2, then we want to change the text to true. So that is going to be the numCheck underscore txt. So we'll have numCheck underscore txt dot text equals true. Now, we want something that also tells us whether or not this is false. So we could just go ahead and end the if statement there, and it would check if it's true, and if it's not true, it would do absolutely nothing. But what we really want is something that says if it is false, then let's go ahead and output something different. And so we'll say else that equals false. So the else could be on the same line. You know, this is the way I like to see it myself, where it has curly bracket, end curly bracket, else, begin curly bracket, then the new function or the new event, action to take, and then we end our curly bracket, and then we have to end the main curly bracket for the function. You should go ahead and reformat things just to make sure things are working. So let's see if that first one works. If we check out the first one, if num1 is less than num2, then it should say true. Excellent. And right now, that's outputting exactly what we want. Now, let's copy this and paste our next one underneath. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and change num1 so it equals 2. That way it's not less than 2. And let's just see what happens. Uh-oh, I have something. Duplicate function definition. I should change the num2 value after I do this other function. So I'll just delete that for right now. Let's try that again. So right now, what's going to happen if we hit if num1 is less than num2? Is it going to be true or false? Because num1 and num2 are both the same value in our code. They're both equal to 2 right now. What I should get is the false. So that's why we have that else statement, so that we can actually do something if the value is false. If we don't have the else statement, then it just runs the if, and if that's not true, then it does nothing, which can sometimes be good, but it's often important that you have some sort of error checking in there and default action when you do have a conditional that does not work right, or that that it's a false value. Anyway, let's go ahead and output our next one, and this is going to be num2. And what we're trying to do here is find out if num1 equals num2. So we'll say if num1 equals num2, then this will be true, else it's going to be false. Since we currently have our numbers here as 2 and 2, then they should be that they do equal each other, which is true currently. So let's, of course, change this to check nums2, and we need, oops, that's still check num1. This will be check nums2, and that one should be check nums2, and that should be check nums2. Let's test this out. Now we have if num1 is less than num2, it's false because num1 and num2 are the same. If num1 equals num2, it should be true because right now they do equal the same. Now this next one is pretty simple. I'm just going to copy nums2 and duplicate that and call it nums3, 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 and nums3. Now what we have here, instead of a double equals, is we want to put an exclamation point and then equals. And what that means is if num2 does not equal num1 does not equal num2, then let's say that that's true. But if num1 does equal num2, then it should be output as false. Since we currently have 2 and 2, that means that we should be getting a false reading, because num1 and num2 are currently equal to each other. So this would only be true if they did not equal each other. So that is how that's working currently. And of course, if we took them back to our numbers var number 1 and 2, 3, 4, which was correct before, or the way that we had it before, sorry, then of course this should be true because now num1 does not equal num2, and this will be false because num1 does not equal num2 as well. So if num1 equals num2, it's true, but in this case it's going to be false because they're not equal. And this time it will be true because num1 does not equal num2. So that's why that's true. And of course now num1 is less than num2, so that's why that's true. I know it gets a little complicated when you have a lot of code like this, but sometimes just going through it with a lot of code is the only way to do it. So let's go on to the next one. We're going to be check nums4, check nums4, and check nums4. Now, our code is a little bit different here because if we take a look at it, we've got a lot to put. If num1 is less than num2 and num3 is less than num4, then be true. So that is if num1 is less than num2 and num3 is less than num4, then what we can do is say that that's true, else it's false. So what this means is that both conditions have to be true. Num1 has to be less than num2, and num3 has to be less than num4. And right now that'd be true. Now in the next one, we're going to copy this one more time and paste it and change everything to 5. And it's a very minor change that we're going to be doing on this one. The only difference that we're going to do is change the double ands to a double pipe. And that is, you hold down the Shift key and then the key is right above the Enter key. So it looks like this. And the difference between this one and the and is this means or. So it means if num1 is less than num2 or num3 is less than num4, then go ahead and do true. So let's go ahead and change our number back to 2, because now we know that we have 2 that are equal each other and then 2 that are have a difference. So that means for the first one, num1 is less than num2 is false, but this one is true. So what we're going to get is a false reading because we have the and here, both of these have to be true. Since we have an or here, if num1 is less than num2 would be false, or num3 is less than num4 would be true, then our output is actually going to be true instead. So let's see if that works. So now num1 is less than num2 and num3 is less than num4 is false, and the other one will be true. And that concludes using the numbers and lots of comparison operators using conditional statements with if. There are lots of other ways to do it, of course. There are other if something is equal to, if less than and equal to. So just to take a look at what you could do there, like we have this, we could say if it's less than or equal to num2. So that's one way to do it. You could also have greater than or equal to num2. And that's very common to be able to see as well with comparison operators. Anyway, go ahead and put in all the text and make sure that all of your code is working. Save your work, and let's go on to the last tutorial.